I call upon wisdom again, and Mary is the seat of wisdom, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, kindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew your days. Let us pray. Lord, you instruct the hearts of your faithful people by the light of the Holy Spirit. Grant us in the same Spirit to savor what is right, and always to rejoice in his consolation. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Seed of wisdom. So we're doing chapter 5 and 6 today. And if you have any questions as we go along about the text or your text, or if it's not the same as the ones we have here or anything about it, please just bring it up. Did anyone have any afterthoughts or further questions on what we've covered so far that's been rattling around in your head? No, okay. So to begin chapter 5, we have the bridegroom speaking. It says, I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. And again, that's those signs of intimacy, not really his sister. Although Jesus says, whoever does the will of my Father is my brother and sister and mother. My bride. I have gathered my myrrh. Oh, now, please pass this around. This is myrrh, so you can smell it if you like. Just open it up and smell it. Don't taste it. Yeah, you can open it up and smell it.
You can grab it early if you want. Why not?
My myrrh with my spices. That word that comes up, spices, all the time is balsam. So it's again kind of that resinous kind of fragrance. And it says, I have eaten the honeycomb with the honey, and I have drunk my wine with my milk. And so, the Father's comment with different types of spices and nourishment I represent. Milk and the wine, honey, the land flowing with milk and honey, the promised land. Often, St. Paul will mention a couple times about milk being not yet solid food. So for those who are just newly initiated in the faith, or as it says on the quote from 1 Peter on a low Sunday after Easter, come and drink the milk, the newly born Christians, like newborn babes, as the letter says. So that's taken as a food for beginners, whereas wine, of course, the wine of love is taken as a food for those who are more advanced in love. Now that rest of the line is eat friends or companions, and some translations, will simply say, and drink, O lovers. But that dodim, again, that we've seen already that is not just a plural noun for beloved, it means love-making. And the word is actually, after it says drink, and then says get drunk. So it's not get drunk. It does have that in the Vulgate, by the way. It says be inebriated, O dear ones, most dear ones. But that also is not correct. They got the drunk part right, but not what you're getting drunk on. It's actually get drunk on love. So get drunk with love.
What is the word that means love-making?
Dodim. It comes from the word beloved, David, the beloved one, and it's used throughout the song. But in the plural, we see it already in the beginning of the first chapter. In the plural, it really does mean love-making. So it really is saying you get drunk with love and with the actions of love. And of course, all the mystical inebriation, the spiritual inebriation with the love of God, filling our hearts, in the allegorical sense. So, to be clear about that. Now it says, this is a famous verse, I was asleep, but my heart was awake. And so it says, I'm asleep, that means all my passions are put to sleep, and my heart is awake because of that. I'm more alert because the rest of my being has been appeased or has abated in its turmoil, and so my heart is awake. It can also just mean in a literal sense, if a person is asleep, A lover is asleep, nonetheless the heart stays awake, alert to the coming of the beloved, which is in fact going to happen in just the next verse. So we shouldn't be asleep. We shouldn't be asleep. We should, as Christ says, stay alert, stay awake, for the beloved is coming at, or the master is coming at a time you do not.
Could I ask something?
Go ahead.
That I was sleeping, that you say means the senses are asleep. Where does that come from? Where does that interpretation come from?
Well, from the fathers of the church. You get it from Gregory of Nyssa and St. Various mystics when they comment on that verse.
And they coincide.
Well, yeah, that's one of the common interpretations. Yeah, I can't point to all of them that say that,
Okay.
but it's often cited. Then it says, "The voice of my beloved, knocking." All right, so the lover is knocking on the door. The idea is, she's asleep, and it is nighttime, as we'll see, or it can be taken to be nighttime, as we'll see from the next verse. It says, so it says, "Open to me, my sister, my friend, my dove, my perfect one." Right, there's another epithet that comes up, my perfect one. My head is dripping with dew. And that's a beautiful image, like the nighttime dew is the locks of the bridegroom as he arrives. And that's taken, like the Holy Spirit, in the thoughts of Christ, etc. The Spirit being, it says his head, my head is wet with the dew of the night. My heart is wet with dew. My locks with the dew of the night. Yeah, that's the second part of it. So, and the dew of the night, is the spiritual inspiration which can come, in the darkness rather than the light, as St. John of the Cross would say. But it's a beautiful, very central image to be, in its own right. With the bridegroom comes with the dew of the night in his locks. So she says, "Well, I have taken off my robe, my tunic, my garment. How can I put it on again? And I have washed my feet. How can I dirty them again?" So it's taken in aesthetically sometimes, as saying, well, I've been purified and taken off the clothes of my passions, all the stuff. How do you? How can I dirty them again? But that doesn't make sense if she's coming to meet the bridegroom. I take it much more in the sense of you have to be fully human. You have to take on. She has to put back on her clothes and put on her feet, or go get her feet dirty on the floor, in order to love Christ and really to let His love be active, in your life and in the world. You have to get dirty. You have to go out into the world and be, not to divest yourself of your humanity, but rather put it on. As I say, that's more my own take on it. That's not what you generally find in the Fathers, but that's the idea. This next verse is very expressive. "So my beloved sent his hand through the latch, and my whole being, my innards, were in commotion, in turmoil, in leapt with, when you're in love with someone and your whole stomach turns upside down, that kind of thing. Your whole being reacts to his presence. And he's reaching it now. How? It says, "My love reached in for the latch." I don't know how it's translated here. Thrust his hand into the opening. That's literally what it says. Slipped his hand through the latch hole. Yeah, see, that's the point. The idea is that it's one of those, you've probably seen these doors in old places where wooden doors with a latch on the other side, but the keyhole is so big you can put your finger through, and if it's not locked, you can push the latch up on the other side. That's probably what's going in here.
Here it says, "My lover puts his hand in through the opening," which is kind of nice because it leaves it open to all kinds of things.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. It's also obviously a very sensual sexual image in its literal sense. But in the mystical sense, the beloved is putting, who's, entering into your heart, knocking at your door, as the book of Revelation in fact says, "Behold, I stand at your door and knock, and whoever opens to me, I will come in and have supper with them and he with me. So it's the sense of the bridegroom coming and knocking at your door, and if you're not completely asleep but your heart is awake, you'll be able to respond. But it's very strong words there. My heart was in total, my whole being, my innards, not just my heart, it's my innards. It's the word means innards, my viscera, were in turmoil at his because of him. So she says, I rose to open to my beloved. My hand or my arm, my fingers. In Hebrew, this is going to come up again. The fingers, the hand, and the arm are all word can mean all of that at the same time. The word for hand can mean the whole arm. It's not as specific as in all the time as in English or other languages. So my hand was dripping with myrrh. It's great we have the myrrh today because all the myrrh keeps coming up. My fingers, and it does say fingers specifically, my fingers with liquid myrrh, so she's dripping myrrh. And of course, the fathers of the church, myrrh once again, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Myrrh has been a symbol always by the fathers of death and mortification because it was used to embalm Christ's body. So when your fingers are dripping with myrrh, that means your actions have been mortified. In other words, you only do actions which are in accord with the kingdom of God and the spreading of God's love. So all your actions have been purified by God. They're dripping with liquid myrrh on the opening of the door, on the door latch.
So is that symbolic?
Yes.
If we get some of that myrrh on our hands, are we purified?
No. No. Symbolic. Right. So I opened to my beloved, so it's verse 6, and my beloved had slipped away. He was gone. And my soul, my soul, literally, my soul went out at his word, or as he spoke. Now, in other words, my love slipped away, but my whole being went out of me, my soul. Now, in Latin, and this is maybe one of the chants I'm going to play next week from they loved this verse. They always put it to music because it says, "Anima mea liquefacta est." My soul was liquefied, became dripped away. It was liquefied at his word, his speaking. So cum locutus est. So that's very expressive, even though it doesn't say that.
The Vulgate actually uses melted.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, liquefied.
And I had a previous question. When it says here, sorry, I have my Sherlock Holmes lens here. Perfect. They use the undefiled.
Yeah, okay.
And that has a better connotation, it seems to me, in light of the rest of the verse, than perfect, because that...
well, you're right. Perfect has many different meanings in English. The application of the Hebrew is pure, the undefiled, that's correct, yeah. Perfect in that sense, unstained. Mm-hmm.
Well, here it says, sank at his leaving, my soul...
Well, that's an interpretation. That could be. Otherwise, my soul, when he was gone, my heart went out. You could say my heart sank. You could say that. But as I say, the Vulgate takes it more as I just was washed away, swept away by his presence. But it does say literally, my soul went out, and that's what the Greek has as well. So, in fact, let's see what Gregory of Nyssa has to say on these verses.
Well, what does Nyssa mean? Where he was
That's
from?
his town. The town where he was a bishop.
Where?
In North Africa. So
Was
let's
he black?
What?
Was he black?
No. He was from Turkey. So let's see. Where is it here? Okay. So, like a swift mare, we saw that image earlier, the bride of the canticle has raced the length of the world that we see and touch. Like a dove, she has started to take pleasure in resting in the shade of the apple tree. We saw that verse too. The bridegroom compared to the apple tree? No, the wild apricot tree, remember? Okay. And now the divine night shrouds her. And in that night, the bridegroom approaches without being seen. So he's taking the night in a mystical sense, the darkness in which God appears. How indeed should the invisible make himself visible in the night? But even while he evades the grasp of clear knowledge and puts himself at a distance in the invisibility of his nature, he allows the soul a certain sense of his presence. That's a very famous phrase from the theology of Gregory of Nyssa. Sense of presence. That's how he defines mystical experience. Sense of presence. So, a certain sense of his presence. So what mystical initiation does the soul receive through the mediation of this night? The word touches the door, by which we may understand a spiritual intention of the mystery, the introduction into the soul of that which the soul is seeking. The truth stands outside our nature inasmuch as our knowledge is but in part, as the apostle says, but it knocks at the door with suggestions of hidden wisdom. Open the door, it says. And at the same time as it calls, it gives the means of opening. Listen to this. Offering as keys those beautiful titles of the bride that are capable of opening what is locked. Isn't that a beautiful idea? In other words, the names that he called my sister, my bride, my perfect one, he says are actually the keys by which he gets in the door, that awaken in her a sense of her true dignity and who she really is in relation to him. That's a very beautiful thought.
Oh, that's nice.
For the meanings of these names are really and truly keys, giving access to the mysteries. My sister, my love, my dove. If you wish your door to open, he says, and the gates of your soul to be lifted up to give entry to the King of Glory, that's from Psalm 24, then become my sister by accepting the rule of my will within your soul. This is what I just quoted a minute ago. For according to the gospel, he is the brother and sister of Christ who lives in conformity with his will. Approach the truth, be his love, that nothing may stand in the way between the two of you. And finally, be perfect and become a dove. That is to say, never again let imperfection in. Fill yourself with purity and innocence. Okay.
You know, the sense of presence, that is what St. Teresa of Avila calls intellectual vision.
No, it's not. No, it
No?
isn't. That's just a type of manifestation. The sense of presence is much subtler and goes beyond intellectual visions, if you want to get technical. No, so it's not what it is. Not what it is.
But you know, for all the pushing, suppressing of real human sexuality that the fathers did,
Yes.
it's just such. It's this poem just brings out how wonderful sex is, and how because it's comparable. It's all one.
That's
It's
right.
comparable, and the only way we can really understand this is if you understand sexuality and you understand the mystical.
Well, it certainly
and it's all
helps.
God.
It certainly helps if you're human and you know what it's talking about on the first level.
Yeah, but
Uh,
you know what
but
I'm saying?
but the important point, I think the really important point you're making is that it is all connected. You know, say in marriage, you know, the experience should not just be, it is a sexual experience, it is an emotional experience, it's an experience of friendship, but it should also be a mystical experience. And it can be. The actual sexual act can be a mystical experience, by which I mean, not only are you perfectly united with each other, but you're perfectly united with God in that experience.
And that's what the Hindus.
That's what they mean by tantrism in the other traditions. Yes, that's right. And that's not easy, not easy to get to that point. But the point you're making is the point, which is they all are connected, and that should be the experience that's possible.
It's what you always says, so above, so below.
So
it's
as
all
above,
the
so
same.
below. Exactly. Yeah. And that's something the fathers of the church didn't really understand very well because of their Platonism. But I think that's an important modern insight to bring into it.
But in Eastern spirituality, that's not too. I mean, I think.
Well, you're right. Even in the East, even in Hinduism, is that what you're about to say? They don't always make it that clear either.
Yeah.
Asceticism becomes.
But I think they're more open to that though,
Yes.
as opposed to the body, mind,
That's
spirit
right. That's my impression.
distinction.
That's
yeah.
my impression. Yes.
Well, look at their beautiful sculptures.
Yeah. Well, we have beautiful. I mean, in our Western tradition too, and the Renaissance and such. But it hasn't been well integrated in our own ascetical tradition. That's absolutely true. That's one of the reasons something like this can be so helpful. To see all the dimensions of it, and then how it's supposed to take, what form it's supposed to take in your own personal lives according to your own state of mind.
Well, why were they so anti-sex?
Because of Platonism, and because of the fear of it, and because of St. Augustine, because all sorts of reasons. But we don't. That's a whole another lecture series. But I don't want to. But it has been very, very unfortunate.
Well, I have a question. To be perfect, to be pure, that is only to accept Christ, or to have that in one's consciousness all the time?
No, it doesn't. Well, each one can give his own interpretation of that. It would be that, yes, that you have his name written up on your forehead, so that everything you do is in function of the kingdom of God, yeah. In function of Christ and the Spirit. That would be purity of heart, so that everything you do is inspired by the Spirit and spreads the kingdom of God. That would be, yeah. So it goes way beyond, what we sometimes talking about bodily purity, etc. It's really the purity of the heart and the purity of intention that we have. Let's see. Well, I'll come back to that in a minute. Let's finish this section. I have something to say about Saint Bernard. I sought him and did not find him. I called to him, but he did not answer. People like Saint Teresa of Jesus, who we just mentioned, others, point out how the mystic can be wanting and desiring the presence of the beloved, and he absents himself. The Carmelites speak a lot about that. The union is not complete yet. The union is not constant, but there's a lot of ardor, and you want the beloved to return. But that's not always the case. And at least in experience, the beloved's always there, of course, but you don't always experience his presence, and the beloved doesn't always reveal himself in that way, in that perceptible way all the time. As the Carmelites themselves say, though, this does become more constant as you go further in the spiritual life, and so that there is a constant union, a constant conscious union. But that's at the very summit of the spiritual life. So at this phase, she's still trying to find him, and he's absenting himself, coming back and forth. Then it says, the watchmen, we saw them before, the watchmen found me, and they're taken often as angels or guardians of the Eastern religions have this too, guardians of wisdom, etc. The watchmen found me as they went about the city. They struck me and bruised me and left. Let's see. They lifted up. They took the shawl or the veil, the shawl from over me. So there's another sense of being divested of your passions. Another image of that. Getting your shawl taken off. They beat and bruised me. So, sometimes asceticism can be a little punishing. So the angels are knocking you around a little bit here. And they tore the shawl from over me, the watchmen of the walls. So they're keeping the walls. They're the ones that are keeping guard over the city to make sure only the right kind of people get in. Which you see in the book of Revelation too, they don't let all these other types get in.
It's like an initiation.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's a purgation, part of the process. And then so she says, and this she calls them the daughters of Jerusalem again, so I adjure you, daughters of Jerusalem, that if you find my beloved, what will you tell him? That I am sick with love. That same amore langueo that we saw in the second chapter, or somewhere in the beginning there. I am not sick of love, but sick with love. Remember, we saw that already. I'm actually fainting with love. I'm in fever of love. Again, it's a very strong word in Hebrew, and it is what it means. So this is the experience of seeking God and being sought by God, and the back and forth here.
But one thing that's sick, literally sick with love.
Yeah.
I mean, that's in the 19th century. All of the, a lot of novels get the.
Yeah, of course.
The love
Especially
of young birder.
Well, especially if you're doing it wrong.
Well,
if
you
you're
haven't been doing it wrong.
If you fall in love for the wrong
Unrequited
reasons, with the wrong person, there's something mixed up with your psychology and with their psychology. So falling in love is usually a disaster because it's not really love and integrated love.
Well, how can you say that to do it wrong? I mean, love
You
is
would know,
love.
right? Right?
No.
It's
You would know what it's like.
I just
Yeah.
don't think,
Oh, it
you
usually
know,
is, yeah.
No, but I mean, if it's the wrong person or for the wrong reasons, or you get attached to somebody for a
yeah,
reason that you...
but sometimes you
it's
don't
not really
know it's
love.
the wrong person.
Of course you don't know, that's why it's a disaster.
And it might be for the wrong reasons.
It's unconscious.
All
Most of the
right,
time.
this is getting a little out of hand here.
Yeah.
What I would say is, a teenager's first love, your whole being is up in the world, and it's way out of proportion.
Infatuation.
But you never forget it because it's so important in your own development. When I say it's a disaster, I just mean it can't possibly go anywhere. But it's really important, for that particular stage in your development.
Mostly unconscious drives.
Unconscious drives, exactly, and you can't build a life on that. You better not try. But it's important to get to know yourself, at a certain point. And as we've been saying, the ideal for human love is to have it so rich and so beautiful and so integrated that it's a divine experience of God at the same time.
But who gets that? Does anybody get that?
That's pretty hard. But it's the goal, and it's important to realize that it's there and it's possible.
It's a long and winding road.
Father just did a taste on that, so it's on YouTube.
Did I?
Yeah, wholeness in relations.
Yes, that's right, I did, on wholeness in relationships. Yes. So you can see it on my website.
Yeah, a shameless plug.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see this video.
Now I'm going to, as we begin, the next section here is a description of the bridegroom. Now, I'll preface this by saying that St. Bernard, as I said, he has 84 sermons that are beautifully written and very long sermons on the Song of Songs. And he would give them in chapter, a nightly chapter in the monastery. And remember, in those days, even outside the monastery, but especially in monasteries, they didn't have YouTube or iPhones or computers or radios or TVs or anything like that. And the only entertainment they had was listening to the sermons, which were often very, very poetic. So that's why they went on and on and on, and it seems like a lot to us. I said there are 4 volumes in the Cistercian Studies series of St. Bernard's Sermon on the Songs, and the end of the 3rd volume, Sermon 65 out of the 84, is still only on chapter 2. So he never finished it. He didn't get much beyond that. Gilbert of Hoyland took up the slack. One of his successors. You can read him too if you want. That's also published by Cistercian Studies. But he really goes on and on. Remember the section about as the shadows flee and the day breathes? And I mentioned that he has a whole series of sermons on inspiration and expiration and respiration and aspiration and all the different spirations. When it is brought forward the day breathes, it's aspirate dies. So that's a good example. I also noticed, going over his stuff, on the 26th sermon, it's a funeral oration. The monk Gerard in his monastery had just died, and he goes on for 6 or 7 pages about his whole being is destroyed because he's lost Gerard. I mean, partly you can take it partly as the style of the time, kind of a way of, but I think he was in love with him. And it really sounds like it, and he wasn't afraid to say it. So that brings me to, and which is fine, but that brings me to the next part where you actually have the bridegroom being described very erotically. It's a good time to remember maybe that part of the poem was written by a gay man, or by a woman, which would be interesting, a woman poet. But it's certainly from that perspective, and I'm very glad to see that it's not just the woman who's objectified, as usually happens in our culture and others, but now the man gets objectified as well. But notice also, in terms of mysticism, whether it's description of the bride or the bridegroom, physically, it's the body of Christ. It's the church in both cases. So it's all one flesh.
So where are we right now?
5:9. So she's saying I'm sorry, the women, the daughters of Jerusalem are saying to her now, so they're saying, all right, you're going on and on about this guy of yours. You can picture the conversation going on today. The girl's friend is saying, all right, you keep going on and on about this guy. What's so special about this guy? Is basically what he's saying, what they're saying. So, what is your beloved more than a beloved, more than other beloveds, more than other beautiful among women? What is your beloved more than others that you adjure us, so, that you make us swear in this way? So then, here's the description. So my beloved is radiant, all right, like white. Here it's translated milk. Is radiant and ruddy. Edom is Adam and Edom, and Dam means blood. So Edom means like red, earthy red. So I like the translation that says, my beloved is radiant and ruddy. My beloved is radiant and ruddy. This one says, my beloved is milk and wine. But that's, what is some of the ones we have here? My beloved is fair and radiant and ruddy, that's the one. Fair and desirable, radiant and ruddy, refresh and ruddy. Okay, that's interesting. And then distinguished above more than 10,000. All right, so radiant and ruddy, that also recalls, remember King David when he came in from the field, as he was about to be anointed king, he was a ruddy, handsome lad. That might be being evoked here. And of course, the fulfillment of David, Christ, is the radiant and ruddy. Milk and the wine, the different levels of mystical experience that we saw earlier already. The ruddy also evoking the blood, possibly. And the inclination and the earthiness of the red color. So his head is like pure gold, fine gold. Don't think that means he's blonde. He's talking about the face, the complexion more. All right. Then he goes on about the hair. The same words that were used for the thicket of his hair, the same words that we used for the bride earlier. The thicket of the hair. His locks, or that was also used, that he also spoke about in the dew of the night, right? Let's see, remember that verse, whose locks wet with the dew of the night. Let me just check it's the same word. Let's see, yes it is, okay. So, his locks, his hair, now they don't know, this is a word that doesn't come up any other place, so I'm not quite sure what it means. Taltalim, they think it might mean palm fronds, so his locks are like palm branches. But they're black as a raven. Shakar, that word keeps coming up, that dark before dawn. That's where we said use black but beautiful, or black and beautiful in the beginning, the same idea. The black hair, of course, people in the Middle East, that's the color of their hair. That's a beautiful description. Then his eyes are like doves, just like the bride's eyes were described as doves. But by the streams of water, maybe that's like the pool of the eye, maybe even referring to tears, possibly. And here it is. We had the description of the bride's teeth earlier. Remember, here's the same idea. They're washed in milk. That's interesting. But here it's describing the eyes. So they're washed in milk and seated in fullness.
When they speak about milk, whose milk? Is it sheep, goats? Because there were no cows there, were there?
No, sheep and goats, yeah.
Sheep and goats.
Let's see. Saving bathe. Some of these translations, I'm just noticing, I remember this now from the last. Some of the translations, like the New American Bible, her eyes like doves beside running water. His teeth would seem bathed in milk and are set like jewels, fitly set in their fullness. That makes sense to me, because it sounds almost more like it's a description of teeth here when it says, because remember bathed before, that was a description of the teeth of the bride earlier. So maybe it's talking about bathed in milk, describing the teeth, and sitting in fullness sounds more like teeth than eyes. Again, the idea that not one of them is missing.
It's very white.
Yeah, it could be. It could be either way. Yeah, yeah. But most take it as the eye, and there's no the word teeth does not appear here, so it could just be the eyes that are being described. And his cheeks are beds of spices, towers of scents, perfumes. Let's see. His lips are lilies. Dripping liquid myrrh. There's that myrrh again. Possibly referring to kisses. But once again, all the aspects of the beloved are fragrant with virtue and the presence of God. That kind of thing. I remember what I said earlier about arms and hands and stuff. So when it says here, it actually says his hand are like columns of twisted. What are some of the we're on the next page already. Arms. His arms are rods. The golden rods. A golden rod set with topaz with a type of gold. No, set with tarsis. Tarsis is the word. They think it might evoke the capital of Samaria in the old days, which was Tarsis. So evoking an ancient city and its beauty, set with thrones, set with gems. Rods of gold is a lovely image of the arm, and of course the arms of the mystical body. What are the legs of the mystical body? The different vocations in the church, preaching, charitable exercise, going preaching the gospel. These kind of comments that are made sometimes here. The same word that was used before about the bride whole interior insides being in turmoil. Here the same word is here used here. So it really kind of would mean his abdomen or his torso. It is a work of ivory. All right. A nice description, and his inlaid with sapphires, and then his legs, where the thighs are calves, it's not quite clear. His legs are pillars of marble. It's a nice description too. So you have these architectural images for the bridegroom. It's, strength and beauty. Marble and ivory, etc.
Sounds like the statue of David.
Yeah, so it's just very much like a statue. Yeah. Just to evoke strength and beauty, and of course the strength of the mystical body as well.
I found a definition of loins that said it had to do with a garment that men put around their genitals. So it's not. It could be not torso or abdomen, but lower.
Well, it's a work of ivory. So it includes all of that. It includes everything from the neck to the legs, I would say. But it's purposely not clear, in all of that. Ivory, and the work of ivory. That's the only place in the whole Bible that word appears. The work of ivory. The use of that word, it says here in the commentary, in the sense of belly, strongly points to the words Aramaic cognate, all right, and may refer to the statue of the idol in Daniel, where the belly was made of bronze. Same word. So if it goes back to an Aramaic word, it would mean the belly rather than lower pelvis or even the torso would mean the belly. And set upon pedestals of gold. And final descriptions are his appearance. Same word was used of the bride in chapter 2. Just the whole appearance is like Lebanon, whether that means here it's more like cedar, could be whiteness, but also chosen or distinguished as cedars. Bahur, it means chosen one, but Bahir is another word, also means a strong young man. so related word. So that's why it's translated. A man like a cedar is translated here in this version. But distinguished like a cedar. And then finally, his palater, his mouth is sweet, and he is all desirable. Well, all of him is desirable. Hemet means desire. It's funny that Bakur and Hemet brought together. There's a synagogue in Long Beach, right near the beach, and I saw inscribed on the front Bahure Hemet, which means strong young men, the desirable young men. I said, wow, what's that doing in front of the synagogue? It's actually a phrase from Ezekiel talking about young warriors. But I still think it's weird. Why they put that phrase on the...
Maybe they don't know what it means.
Of course they know what it
They know
means.
what it means.
They do.
Maybe they have an organization for young men.
And maybe so,
Or
a
athletes.
youth organization or something. That's interesting, yeah, could be. But it's a very expressive phrase, isn't it? Young
Oh,
men,
the
young men,
daughters of
desirable young men.
Is there a way to recruit young men?
Daughters
Yeah.
of Jerusalem, I still don't know what that is. What's Daughters of Jerusalem?
They're just a chorus, like the Greek chorus, the companions of the woman, of the bride, like her maids of honor.
What, the Daughters of Jerusalem?
Yeah. Just like the attendants of the queen in the 45th psalm, the wedding psalm, the royal wedding, the attendees, those who were attending upon the bride, I mean, the maids.
So women are always attended to, not men.
Right. Although remember, we saw the litter of Solomon described with being protected by all the warriors with their shields and their spears
Yeah.
before. So they're attended by soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
The men are, like the angels are. So this is my beloved, and this is my friend, the daughters of Jerusalem. So that's the 5th chapter, and that's the description. Any comments or questions before we go on to chapter 6?
Beautiful. So beautiful.
It is very, very gorgeous. Very beautiful.
And supposedly, though, these different passages, these different chapters they're not continuous. They're just
It seems like they're all edited. People have tried to impose like a form or a structure on this whole thing, but it's not easy to do. They're just kind of like a stream of consciousness going back from one thing to another, kind of like a love relationship itself. It doesn't have that easy structure. Planned incidents, etc. So now the women speak to her and say, so where has your beloved gone, a beautiful among women? Where has your beloved gone? And we will seek him with you. So she's inspiring her companions to, just as you do in the church, inspire others to love God, love Christ. My beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to pasture in the gardens, and to gather lilies. Again, erotic connotations to all of that. Because she's the garden, of course. So, my beloved is mine, and I am his, and he pastures among the lilies. Mutual belonging to each other.
Yeah, it is really nice.
So, now lest we get the wrong impression about patriarchy and the equality, here we have a second description of the bride. Right, so, and a lot of it is the 5, 6, and 7 are simply repetitions of the previous chapter. So you are beautiful, my love, my companion, as Tirza. Yeah, this is what I should have said earlier. Tarsus before was just a gem. Tirza is the former capital of Syria, and that's being evoked here. It's not always even translated as such. It's translated as some kind of gem or some kind of place. What does it say? You are. Let's see. You are beautiful as Tirza. Oh, it does have Tirza here, and all on this page. Okay. Meaning as like the exotic ancient capital. You are beautiful as Jerusalem. So she is being obviously be compared to cities, Virgin Daughter of Zion, the bride, the people of God, as Jerusalem itself, as the people itself. Awesome. You're really awesome. So if you want to use the word awesome now in Hebrew, ayuma, you can say that to people. Awesome.
Ayum.
In the feminine. Awesome as... Now here it's a really interesting verse. Right? Things that are arrayed. Arrayed, something that's arrayed. So, terrible as an army with banners, majestic as the starry heavens, as awe-inspiring as bannered troops, formidable as an army. Well, what is it? All right. They make a really good case for the fact that there's things that are arrayed there, because you're talking about
Where are you?
not 6:4. 6:4. Terrible as an army with banners, lovely as Jerusalem. Let's see. I don't even have that there. Awe-inspiring as bannered troops, formidable as an army.
I don't have any of that.
Sure you do. And then down, it does come up again in verse 10. That's why I did lose my place a little bit there. It's clear in verse 10. So maybe what I'll do is I'll talk about it there before we do here. It has traditionally been interpreted, as we'll see in verse 10, as an army in array, an array of hosts, an array of soldiers. But good cases can be made for saying that it really is referring to an array of stars, the constellations. So you're beautiful as the constellations, not as beautiful as a column of soldiers. That's not particularly beautiful.
Well, yeah, but an army at full military parade
I guess.
is impressive. It's not necessarily beautiful, but impressive.
Impressive, yeah. And remember, she's awesome here. She's
Right.
awe-inspiring, so that's true. You could maybe take it that way. But when we get to verse 10, we'll come back to this question because then it's a little clearer down there. So turn away your eyes from me, because they put me in turmoil. So it's getting more dramatic. The bride in the last chapter her whole being was in turmoil, and now the bridegroom, his whole being is in turmoil, because she's looking at him. For they dazzle me. So you can dazzle Christ by the way we gaze in love. And then we have the same repetition of your hair is like a flock of goats streaming down Mount Gilead. Right? Your teeth are as white as ewes, coming up from the washing. All of them bearing twins. All of them, not one of them is missing. We saw all that before. We discussed it last time. Okay. Interesting description of the teeth. Your teeth are like so your teeth are like white ewes. And then the curve of your cheek, like a pomegranate, like a half of a pomegranate. There's that verse again, behind your hair, or in the thicket of your hair, rather than behind your veil. We talked about that last time too. It's the same phrase coming up again. So notice formulas, verses, phrases come up again, and that's the way poetry works. In Homer and oral poetry, you have phrases and formulas that are transmitted and included again and again in the poem. So 80 are the queens, and 80 are the concubines, and the maidens are without number. So we know King Solomon had hundreds. And of course the mystics they distinguish these different levels of dedication to Christ. So you have maidens without number, the daughters of Jerusalem, all those who are simply followers of Christ. Then you have the concubines, those who sometimes allow themselves to be joined with God, with Christ. But the queens, who are always married to him and his partners, the true mystics, there. So notice they're like 80, 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. Same idea that there is different levels of experience, different levels of consecration, different levels of dedication to Christ. So that's how that was interpreted, that particular verse. But one alone is my dove, my perfect one. One is she to her mother, radiant is she to the one who bore her? Is the church the one who bore her? Eve, the new Eve? Interesting. But the dove, in any case, is the one bride, which is the one body of Christ, the one. And one also in the sense that perfectly unified in intention and commitment. Just like God is one in the Shema, in the prayer. Elohim Eloheinu Echad, our God is one. So also is the dove one, perfectly unified himself. The daughters of Jerusalem see her, call her blessed rather. They see and call her blessed, the daughters, the maidens, and the queens and the concubines praise her. So they're all engaged in her praise. Now here's that verse 10 that I want to talk about. Who is this, feminine? Who is this actually looking down? Here it says rising. Like the dawn. So you can see why. Rising like the dawn. So you're rising in one sense, but you're looking down. That's what the word actually means. Once you're rising, you're actually looking down. So if it rises, you're also looking down. Progreditur in the Vulgate means who is this that's going forth like the dawn, advancing like the dawn. Or the morning star, or rising dawn is the way it's translated in the Vulgate. Beautiful as the moon, or the whiteness of the moon, bright as the sun, the blazing sun, and awesome as that's the same phrase again. Awesome like the array. Daunting as the stars in their courses, it says here, and that's also what the Revised English Bible says, majestic as the starry heavens. All the others still have terrible as an army with banners. All right. So this makes it an even better case, because all these are astronomical images. The dawn, the sun, the moon, and the stars. So that makes a lot more sense.
I had fearsome, a celestial vision.
Yeah, the same thing. Not visions, though. It would be the stars. So the things in the array. So that's a very beautiful one. I first encountered this a few days after I entered the monastery at the Feast of the Assumption. And here's that verse for the Feast of the Assumption. Quaesti star, quae ascendit, sicut aurora consurgens, fulcra luna, electa ut sol, terribilis, ut castrorum macies ordinata. So that means, who is this that is ascending, going up, rising, even though it means looking down? I didn't notice this until this morning for the first time. They changed the Vulgate to ascendi instead of progreditur because Mary is ascending. So for the feast, they changed Feast of the Assumption. They changed it. Who is this that was ascending like the dawn, the rising dawn, beautiful as the moon, chosen, elected as the sun. That's they changed one of the letters in the Hebrew. It actually means bright as the sun, but if you change one of the word from bahar to bachar, it becomes chosen. Like we talked about the chosen young men before. So I think that's where they got that. But it actually means bright as the sun, beautiful as the moon, bright as the sun, as terrible as an army in battle array. Terribilis, awesome. Or the commentary puts that very well. We say terrible in French, formidable, which means it's great. Or as we say, it's terrific. That means it inspires fear. Terrific. But we really mean it's great, right? So that's what awesome means here. It means awesome like the kids use it today. Wow, that's awesome.
Awesome, dude.
Well, we're in the home stretch. A couple more verses. Now, this would be the bridegroom speaking here. Let's see. Even though sometimes they say it's the bride, but it doesn't really seem to make sense. The one who's always going down into the garden is the bridegroom, and the garden is the bride. So even just from that point of view, but we'll see it becomes more important in verse 12. So I went down to the walnut grove. The garden, we think it's walnuts here, from the way the word that's used in other Middle Eastern languages. Agos is walnut. I went down to the walnut grove to see the green by the brook, the new vegetation, to see the blossoms, the vineyards in blossom, and the pomegranate trees. So again, the different flowers in the garden. Okay, as I say, we're almost finished, but the trouble is, let's see, I will read this directly from here. 6:12. Generally considered to be the most difficult verse in the song. So gird your loins here. 6:12 has received the widest range of interpretations imaginable, and countless suggested emendations, and has at times been omitted as untranslatable. So the translation proposed here is based on the text with a single emendation at the end of the verse. All right, now, okay, so let's see what we got here. So verse 12, the very end. Let's look at the different versions. Before I was aware, my fancy set me in a chariot beside my prince. Notice what it says on the bottom. Meaning of Hebrew, uncertain. Okay. Okay, well, before I was aware, my fancy set me in a chariot beside my prince. All right. 12. I did not recognize myself. She made me a prince chosen from myriads of people. There's no chariot there at all. All right. Before I knew it, my heart had made me the blessed one of my kinswomen. So it's the bride who's speaking there. Remember what we said, though. It's probably the bridegroom. So that will be a key to interpretation. Before I knew, my desire had hurled me onto the chariots of Aminadab. And then that explains at the very bottom, maybe that's a mythical figure who rides around on a chariot interfering in love affairs. Well, that's pretty wild. Aminadab. Nadib literally means the noble of my people, or my noble people, or the noblest of my people. But if you just take it as a proper name, it's Aminadab. Right. But that's what we mean if you translate it. That's why you have blessed one of my kinswomen, why you have my prince, the noble one of my people, my prince, the first one, that's where they get that, the noble one of my people. Myriads of my people. So blessed one and myriads are a modification of the word that's actually there. You're switching one letter out, like Rakab, it means chariot, Merkab, but if you switch the letter around, you can get the word for blessed, which is why you say it made me the blessed one of my kinswomen. So they're already switching letters around to make those translations. So what does it actually say? All right. I'm going to tell you what each word means, and they're just put right next to each other. No, I knew. So I did not know my soul. She placed me, chariots, noble of my people. I did not know my soul. She placed me, chariots of Aminadab, my noble of my people.
I like
All right.
chariot because it means.
Well, that's just what it
carry.
has. I think we're going to keep the chariot. We're going to keep the chariot. So notice if you take, I do not know my soul, that's where you get the Revised English Version. I did not recognize myself. I did not know my soul. But more likely, it simply means, it's an idiom which means, if I did not know myself, before I was aware. I did not know my soul, before I knew it. If you take my soul, even though it's on the previous line, to go with she, which is feminine, she placed me, there would be my fancy placed me. She made me a prince. The first version of the New Revised says, my fancy set me. So that's taking not my soul as a subject. My soul placed me, rather than taking it as part of the idiom before I knew it. That's probably not right. So the feminine there is not the soul who placed me, my fancy placed me, it's the bride. So before I was aware, she, that's what I said, she made me, what? She, the bride, placed me chariots. Now, Aminadab, the noble of my people, can be taken as a superlative, meaning the best, the noblest of my people. In other words, in a lavish chariot. That's what they're suggesting. Take it as a lavish chariot. So she placed me, and you don't need a preposition there according to them either, for the chariots. It can be a locative. So she placed me in the most lavish of chariots. Before I was aware, my bride put me in the most lavish of chariots, which is what? Herself. Or you could take him as the chariot. She made me a chariot, without the preposition put in the chariot. That would be another way of looking at it. She made me a most lavish chariot.
So she elevated him.
Yeah, or
So
even wrote it. I don't know.
I didn't know, but she had already elevated me.
Well, elevated in the sense, but well, she's doing more than that.
Enthroned me.
She sat there, maybe.
Yeah.
She placed me as a chariot. So she sat there, or she was the chariot, placed me in the most lavish of chariots, which is herself. Yeah. What do you have?
I was just thinking, and I don't know about the syntax or how that works out, but in each case, it seems to be my fancy, my desire. It's the impulse of desire or loving or longing or whatever that is.
Before I was aware.
That makes something happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that desire is at the very foundations of the whole thing.
So you would take it more to mean that the soul is doing the placing, my fancy, not she.
Well,
Not necessarily,
well, she
but.
could be doing it, but it's the
It's in that
desire
desire.
that has brought it to this.
Well, I think that's true in any case, yes. Yeah, that's her. It's the love in her own heart and the love between them that's causing this to happen, yes.
So going from sort of metaphor to not the literal, because it's all metaphorical, but
Yes.
it's more general in this last. It seems as if it funnels down into this, primacy of desire or
Mhm.
love or longing or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that desire could be unconscious.
He could, sure, exactly. I did not know.
Yeah.
Well, if he reached in and opened the latch, and it's her heart, or if it's just the female voice here, my heart had made me the blessed one of my kinswomen, or
No, that you're taking that as the third one, the New
one.
American Bible. My heart, my soul, literally, my soul placed me as the blessed one among the nobles of my people. But remember, to get blessed out of that, you have to switch the letters around in chariot. So they're reinterpreting, and it's not impossible, but you have to change it a little bit around to get that. So as you say, it's untranslatable or whatever it is, and then many emendations are proposed. And probably the whole structure of the universe doesn't depend on how we interpret that.
Oh, you never
It'll
know.
stand anyway.
You know what I liked about it is that as the authors say in the introduction, it's a pastoral poem, and just like Elizabeth Johnson, it places the human species within the whole creation.
Yes,
I love
that's
that,
true,
and
yeah.
they're part of it. They're not some,
Yes,
hierarchy.
it mentions a few animals we saw last week.
The gazelle.
In addition to the foxes. Well, that's another thing about St. Bernard, by the way. He has a whole sermon interpreted. It was the last sermon in 65 on the little foxes. Do you remember that? These little foxes we saw in chapter 2. And he says, "Oh, those are the people from Toulouse." Literally. Because in other words, they're the heretics of the Catholics probably at the time, you know. So he makes it very, very, just like Dante does, he makes it very personal in his presentation. So you got the book? Tell them about the
I've
book.
got this for $4 on Amazon used. How beautiful is that?
That's the version I'm using.
The whole poem and the Hebrew and
It's very beautifully done.
the introduction is nice because it talks about all the influence of Hellenism and all the pastoral influences of what might have gone into this poem. So it was $4. I just love Amazon.
Oh my goodness.
So I recommend that again.
Yeah.
It's Arial and kind of block BLOCH. It's on the song. It's by far the best thing you can get out there, in my experience.
Now, the King James Version has the 13.
No, that's actually the beginning of chapter 7. So I know sometimes the enumeration is not always the same. So yeah, that's actually 7:1.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see that verse next week.
I did have a
And the
hard time.
Vulgate has the 17 for 5 as opposed to 16.
Yeah, there are some discrepancies in the chapter and verse.
I did have a hard time finding the little Nyssa book, though. It's called the Canticles. I couldn't find that book. The little brown book you have, Nyssa, Gregory of Nyssa.
Oh, thank you for pointing this out. This is printed. It's not available. This is printed by the Carthusians. This is actually the monastery printed
Okay,
this.
that's nice.
So I brought it with me, but.
And the Clairvaux 4 volumes are a fortune.
Yeah, they are. They're expensive.
Fortune.
They're expensive. Yeah. You can get the Gregory's sermons excerpts. It's called From Glory to Glory. I don't think it's still in print though. Hubert Musarillo was my Latin teacher
Probably
at
look
Fordham,
that up too.
and he put that together. He's dead now, but it's a book that's like 40 or 50 years old. So I don't think it's still. I have a copy.
It's not, I couldn't get that.
I have the copy. It's called From Glory to Glory. It's excerpts from the Song of Songs of Gregory of Nyssa. If you can find it, it's very well worth it.
Can I ask a question about E5, going back to 5?
Yeah.
This whole very abrupt turn where she's all excited and he's opened it and he's put his hand in the door and etc. And then suddenly, he's disappeared.
Right.
So you can read it as on a very sort of
God leads us on.
human level, saying, oh well, the love affair something went wrong or whatever.
Oh, but not, I don't think that's being said. It's just that they're playing with each other back and forth. But mystically, is that what you wanted to ask?
I was trying to understand it, so it's sort of a very clear switch in the action, as it were, and I was trying to understand if there's, what the possible interpretations of it are.
Okay. Well, if any of you have any impressions, my view is it's just kind of like a game of back and forth with the beloved coming back and forth, coming and going. But the mystics point out this is the way God treats us as well. He gives us little taste of His presence and then pulls back and makes us long more deeply and then returns. So that's a dynamic that's well known in the spiritual life also. And as I say, the Carmelites speak a lot about that. The Carmelite mystics.
I had a priest say to me, God is always and not yet.
Yeah.
So it's like the presence is always there and yet there's always a want to, and that left a real impression on me, and that's what came up for me when I heard that.
Yeah, and remember it's very good. Yeah, and I remember Gregory of Nyssa, his whole spirituality is you've tasted God, but God is saying, come up, higher, higher, arise, arise. So there's always further to experience, and therefore there's going to be the intermediate phase in between, before you have the higher experience, when you're still longing for it. And so you're continually moving and advancing.
Oh, you speak of Saint Bernard. Is there one Bernard or?
Bernard of Clairvaux, Clairvaux.
Oh,
Yeah.
Clairvaux, okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Actually, to me, the Song of Song in some ways represents Solomon, whoever wrote it.
Well, it certainly wasn't Solomon.
Right.
But he's evoked here.
But using
Like the concubines.
what the normal person seeking God would have experienced a physical relationship rather than strictly a metaphysical relationship. With
Physical
God.
relationship with whom?
With his partner, his love, whoever he loves. And
You
that
mean
would-
humanly speaking?
Yeah, humanly
Yes,
speaking.
yes.
And that would be an easy way to bridge and to, by analogy, say that, a mystical, a spiritual experience will be like this, rather than starting out with a Platonic view
Oh, yeah.
of the universe and saying that the
That's,
physical is.
that's a very good point, that that's really what's being said. If you have that experience, then you can understand
Right.
some of the delight, the intimacy, the intensity of an experience. And realize it's not in your head.
Right.
You know, spirituality is not in your head. If it's not in your body, it's not real yet. You know, you're just reciting creeds, you know, and dogmas. So, but remember, it goes even beyond that, as we said earlier. That ultimately, it's not only as intense as a sexual experience, but that a sexual experience can, at its highest, be an experience of God at the same time. So there is a connection.
Right, right. And in the sexual experience, at least, that sometimes there is an elimination of the I.
Well, good, yes,
Yeah,
yes. There better be. Yeah, that's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
That you two become one, as Genesis says. You know, you actually become one. You go out of your little ego self into a deeper and a higher synthesis, union. Yeah. And your relationship with God, with the whole universe, is on that level as well. You know, as well as not only just with your marriage partner, but it's just that kind of ecstatic union.
And that union is so transcending that there's no more like boundaries of male or female or that sort of thing.
As Paul
It's
says, yeah.
right? You know, it's just
It's
totally-
beyond
yeah.
gender,
Yeah.
and beyond all the distinctions,
Beyond
all the
harmony.
dichotomies, all the tree of good and evil.
Yes.
You know, the knowledge of good and evil. All those dichotomies are overcome,
Yeah.
as all are united. As the great mystic said, and everyone from Nicholas of Cusa to Carl Jung, you know, it's the coincidentia oppositorum. It's the opposites are combined.
Body and spirit.
It's
Unis munis.
the coming together of the opposites, which is a sign of true spiritual maturity when the paradoxes are resolved in a higher synthesis.
So is that also the union with God too?
Yes,
Yeah.
because God includes all of those things.
Is that's when, you know, in the spiritual ascent, you know, when they say you've reached the union with God rather. So that's more or less, that's how you experience things too. Right?
Yeah, and that's a good check to make sure it is God. You know, that it is all inclusive, and that it's an experience of union, you know, rather than exclusion of anything.
Like the
So Christ
universal.
increases and I decrease.
Well, but you're included. Your deeper self is the one that's included. Your ego self decreases, but your Christ self increases.
Yeah.
What's the word I'm looking for? The opposite of particular? Universal?
Yeah,
When you come together. We're the particular.
right.
And God is the universal.
Which is what happens in the
Become
incarnation.
one.
We're about to celebrate. The divine and the human, the universal in particular, become one. Literally, you could say one person in Christ. So that's the formula for the culmination and the fulfillment of the entire universe. When Christ will be all in all, and you'll be part of that. You will be that. So it's pretty exciting. You can't grasp it. It can only grasp you.
Through
You have to surrender to it.
and through
And
experience.
one of the reasons that Christ is called the Word, rather than,
What is that reason?
it's ephemeral in some ways. You can't grasp it.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. But obviously, you can't grasp the divine word. You are a word spoken by God. But as all theologians point out, the word of God is substantial. I mean, it's not passing. It's not ephemeral compared to human words.
But maybe we can be grasped by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That is-
Spoken by it. Let God speak your true name. When he knocks on your door and comes in and has supper with you, and transform you into that. That's exciting.
So we are the door.
You said he's the door, right? Well, we're the door. We're the whole room. We're the bride and the bridegroom, and remember, it all becomes one. Like the heavenly feast where Jesus is the bridegroom, the waiter, the food, everything. And along with us ourselves.
Rejoice. Again, I say rejoice.
Yes. So plenty to rejoice. So all the more reason that you just had a description of the beloved here. So rejoice in that as Christmas comes, as Christ becomes one of us, as God becomes one of us. And I hope you have a wonderful Christmas celebration. And if you're up for it, and you're in town and everything, and if you've recovered from your eggnog hangover, come next Saturday for the Feast of the Beloved Disciple, the Feast of John the Evangelist, to complete the last 2 chapters. And we'll hopefully hear some chant as well. Hopefully.
And get